Kunjabihari ISKCON Guruvrinda Ki, Prabhupada Ki, Entourage Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Thai Gaur Premanande. So reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 6, Uniting Two Worlds. India, unifying ISKCON. The devotees then left Prabhupada's room in a joyful mood, prepared to join the others and take part in an uplifting, non-political Gaura Purnima festival. Interesting, Gaura Purnima is just coming up here as well. The next morning, Prabhupada went for his walk on the roof of the Mayapur building. As soon as he began circumambulating on the roof, at least 24 devotees, mostly temple presents and sannyasis, joined him. The temple presents felt victorious. Their positions were vindicated and the misunderstandings of the philosophy had been straightened out. Now everything was proper. The whole affair had increased the devotees' faith in Prabhupada and in the wisdom of following his orders without false prestige. As they walked, Panchadravida Swami, in a mood of humorous relief to the tension of the past days, began questioning Prabhupada in an odd way. Srila Prabhupada said, "There is one thing I don't understand. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that story of Shakshi Gopal, the deity who came to witness for the young Brahmin. So the young man was serving the old Brahmin, and then the old Brahmin promised the hand of his daughter in marriage, and then the deity came to bear witness. So if he was such a pure devotee, why did he call the deity to come such a great distance just so he could become married? Why didn't he want to remain single, and why did he make the deity come just for his marriage?" Did anybody else think that when they read that part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita? I remember reading that too and thinking, oh, why is he causing the deity to come and travel so much? Just so he can get married if he's a Brahmin, why does he even bother getting married? And so, Prabhupada speaking, it was not only the words but the way Panchadravida said them, jesting in the role of an overly critical sannyasi. And Prabhupada immediately entered the joking spirit. We are not against marriage, we are against illicit sex. But because no women would have you, now you're saying that no one should marry. Just see the psychology here. The devotees began to laugh wildly. "This is the sour grapes philosophy," said Srila Prabhupada. "Because no women will have you, nobody wants you, therefore you're feeling this rejection and thinking nobody should get married." Srila Prabhupada ki. Amazing, after such tension, Prabhupada introduces humour. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10, entitled Maharaja Huganamish Jad Bharat, Text 12. Vishesha Buddhir Vivaram Manak Cha. Vishesha Buddhir Vivaram Manak Cha. Pashyama Yan Na Vyavaharto Anyat Pasyamayano Vyavaharatonyat Ka Ishvaras Tatra Kim Ishitavyam Ka Ishvaras Tatra Kim Ishitavyam Tatapi Rajan Karavama Kim Te Tatapi Rajan Karavama Kim Te Vishesha Buddhir Vivaram Manakcha Vishesha Buddhir Vivaram Manakcha Pasyamayana Vyavaharatonyat Pasyamayana Vyavaharatonyat Ka Ishvaras Tatra Kim Ishitavyam Ka Ishvaras Tatra Kim Ishitavyam Tatapi Rajan Karavama Kim Te Tatapi Rajan Karavama Kim Te Vishesha Buddhir Vivaram Manakcha Pasyamayana Vyavaharatonyat Ka Ishvaras Tatra Kim Ishitavyam Tatapi Rajan Karavama Kim Te. Please chant. Vishesha Buddhi, of the conception of the distinction between master and servant. Vivaram, the scope. Manak, a little. Cha, also. Pashyama, I see. Yat, which. Na, not. Vyavaharata, than the temporary usage or convention. Anyat, other. Ka, who. Ishvara, the master. Tatra, in this. Kim, who. Ishitavyam, is to be controlled. Tatapi, nevertheless. Rajan, O king, if you still think that you are master and I am servant. Karavama, I may do. Kim, what? Te, for you. Translation, my dear king, if you still think that you are the king and that I am your servant, you should order me and I should follow your order. I can then say that this differentiation is temporary and it expands only from usage or convention. I do not see any other cause In that case, who is the master and who is the servant? Everyone is being forced by the laws of material nature. Therefore, no one is master and no one is servant. Nonetheless, if you think that you are the master and that I am the servant, I shall accept this. Please order me. What can I do for you? Please repeat. My dear King, if you still think that you are the king and that I am your servant, you should order me and I should follow your order. I can then say that this differentiation is temporary and it expands only from usage or convention. I do not see any other cause. In that case, who is the master and who is the servant? Everyone is being forced by the laws of material nature. Therefore, no one is master and no one is servant. Nonetheless, if you think that you are the master and that I am the servant, I shall accept this. Please order me. What can I do for you? Srila Prabhupada's purport. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Aham Mameti, one thinks, I am this body, and in this bodily relationship, he is my master, and he is my servant, she is my wife, he is my son. All these conceptions are temporary due to the inevitable change of body and the arrangement of material nature. We are gathered together like straws floating in the waves of an ocean, straws that are inevitably separated by the laws of the waves. In this material world, everyone is floating on the waves of the ocean of essence, as described in Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Michimaya Vashi Yacha Beshi Kacha Habidububai Jiv Krishna Das Evishvas Karli Ta'ar Dukanai. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur states that all men and women are floating like straws on the waves of material nature. If they come to the understanding that they are the eternal servants of Krishna, they will put an end to this floating condition. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.37, Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava. Due to the mode of passion, we desire many things, and according to our desire or anxiety, and according to the order of the Supreme Lord, material nature gives us a certain type of body. For some time we play as master or servant, as actors play on the stage under someone else's direction. While we are in the human form, we should put an end to this nonsensical stage performance. We should come to our original constitutional position, known as Krishna consciousness. At the present moment, the real master is material nature. Daivahi Shagunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya, Bhagavad Gita 7.14. Under the spell of material nature, we are becoming servants and masters, but if we agree to be controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and as eternal servants, this temporary condition ceases to exist. Om Gyantamarandasya Gyananjana Sulakaya Chakshurmalitam Yana Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Vakam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Garim Yadkripatamam Mande Shigam Dintanam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Rasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. My dear King, if you still think that you're the king and that I'm your servant, you should order me and I should follow your order. I can then say that this differentiation is temporary and expands only from usage or convention. I do not see any other cause. In that case, who is the master and who is the servant? Everyone is being forced by the laws of material nature, therefore no one is master and no one is servant. Nonetheless, if you think you are the master and I am the servant, I shall accept this. Please order me. What can I do for you? So of course he's speaking in terms of material platform here. On the spiritual platform we're all servants. On the material platform we have some temporary identification and sometimes we take that too seriously and then we get lost. Machchita sarvadurgani mat prasad trishyasi attachetvam ahankaran nashoshasi vinanchasi. If you become conscious of me, you will cross over all obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If, however, you do not act in such consciousness, not hearing me, you will be lost. So this is from the 18th chapter. Krishna is explaining to Arjuna to act in Krishna consciousness, or in consciousness of him, and not to act in false ego consciousness. When we think we're male, we're female, I'm black, I'm white, I'm yellow, and I'm this class or that class, high class, low class, middle class, then these temporary designations limit our conception of our true identity, and it limits our ability to perform devotional service because we're thinking, I'm young, I'm old, I can do this, I can't do that. We're the ones who place the limitations there. And Prabhupada showed that at his age, materially speaking, you would think nobody starts a spiritual revolution at that age, at the age of 70. So he just blew away all excuses and all material conventions that we could place upon our limits. Prabhupada didn't accept limits. Sometimes devotees would say, I'm too fallen to be a devotee, and he'd say, or they say, I'm your most fallen servant. He says, you're the most nothing, you're just insignificant. So sometimes we try to use our false ego, even if we are most fallen, just to get some kind of attention. Just like sometimes we catch a cold, and then we say, oh yeah, when I had the cold, I had it for 3 days. Oh, that's nothing, I had it for 5 days. Then someone comes in and said, I had it for 7 days and it was the worst fever I ever had. So sometimes we compete with each other's misery as well. So this is just kind of the insanity of false ego in Kali Yuga. And then of course people are competing to see who can be the most clever. Sometimes people become institutionalized. They go to university as a student, they get a degree, and then they don't want to leave the campus. We used to visit Stirling University, and there's one person there who was just doing degree after degree because they actually just became institutionalised to the point they didn't really want to leave the campus. It's a kind of false security, so the person ended up becoming a professor. So people are looking for security in this material world, but they're looking for it in some fallible situation. But there's a name for Krishna which means infallible. Does anybody know that? Infallible. He cannot be conquered. He's infallible. He's never... Even Prabhupada said to the devotees said, oh, we completely trust you. He said, don't trust me, trust Krishna. He says, I might let you down, but Krishna won't. And of course the devotees, they had so much faith in Prabhupada because his example was so perfect that they never considered that Prabhupada would let them down, and he didn't. But this is also the mood of the pure devotee. He doesn't take credit for himself. His position is simply, in Prabhupada's words, a peon postman. So peon, P-E-O-N, means that basically simply a servant without an opinion, without an agenda, simply a message carrier. And this is the pure devotee. Not that he has to put his own spin on it. Some people try to get too intelligent, just like Srila Prabhupada. Some of his disciples were involved in translating, and when he gave his Bhaktivedanta purports, then they had the audacity to sometimes comment, and he said, now you've become so intelligent, you correct your own spiritual master. So we should be very careful about that, because to remember where we came from and how we've been saved by Prabhupada and Prabhupada's representatives, we should be careful not to become over-familiar. What was it they say about familiarity? It breeds contempt. So that can go both ways. It can go from juniors to seniors, seniors to juniors. We should always try to be appreciative of someone else's service and surrender. And of course, being appreciative doesn't mean to say that we allow someone to place some limitations on it when we can see the person can do better. In the words of Vaisheshika, ABS, always better service. We're always trying to aspire to do better service. Even if you're doing the same thing every day, say for example you're cooking for the deities every day and there's no change, and you could think, well, there's nothing much more to do, I just go in there and I do it and that's it. But you're always trying to think, how can I make it nicer? How can I please the devotees? How can I please Krishna? And even if externally the ingredients are the same, the technique's the same mantras are being used for offering, but the consciousness, you're trying to improve your consciousness so that the offering is there with a nice consciousness, because that will affect the devotees in a positive way. Or if we're cleaning the temple every day, or if you're at home and you have an altar there, that's your devotional service. Or you're reading and chanting, if you're in lockdown and you can't do much but read and chant, then take that opportunity to do that and try to improve on your quality. Improving on the quantity can also be there when we try to improve on the quality. Just like sometimes the devotees go on book distribution, and I remember when I did one of my best days in terms of the amount of books distributed, then I realised that actually there's so much more room for improvement. Previously I was doing much less and I thought I was doing okay, but when you get some inspiration and you start to do, suddenly you get a little glimpse into a quantum leap in devotional service, you realise how much time I'm wasting, how much time I'm trying to avoid surrender, how much time I'm trying to avoid the thing which is really what I want, because that's which is going to free me. We're thinking that the material world is going to give us what we want. It might give us what we want, but it might not give us what we need. So therefore, in this purport here, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguna, Samudbhava, that we are being forced to act in certain ways according to the influence of the modes of material nature, particularly Rajagun, that is causing us to act to fulfill our material desires. And then sometimes we become despondent and Tamagun, mode of ignorance, comes in. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says that we're floating around like straws on the waves of material nature. So you just imagine some straw in the ocean, it's got no control over where it's going, it's just been thrown here and thrown there. And it might be thinking it's okay because it's on top of the waves, and sometimes it's getting crashing down and it's coming back up again. So we may be thinking like that, but actually the straw doesn't belong in the ocean, it belongs in dry land. So similarly, we've been passed around by the different modes of material nature, used and abused by the modes, and we're willingly surrendering to that, not realising that we are causing our own entanglement and misery in this material world, our temporary happiness and distress. Prabhupada said in relation to this particular bhajan, and he gives a purport and he says this happiness and distress, he says actually it's all distress, it's all misery. And this temporary happiness we get is simply momentarily relief, but it's only a lesser type of suffering. He says this is not positive pleasure. Positive pleasure comes when the soul, through Bhakti Yoga, reunites with Krishna and starts to experience the Ananda which is there through, because Krishna is the embodiment of eternality, bliss and knowledge. When we connect with Krishna, then we also reawaken our nature of eternal bliss and knowledge. And the way to do that is simply with this process of Shravanam, Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. So by this hearing and chanting, we gradually revive our consciousness. Sometimes people enter into a coma, they may have some accident or illness and end up in a coma. And often when people are in a coma, you can't tell whether they're hearing you, whether you're able to, if you're trying to communicate with them, you can't tell. But sometimes what people do is they go there and they speak to the person and they keep on reminding the person who they are, or if they have some amnesia, And then finally something clicks and it reminds them who they are, and then it all starts to come back again. So that's why we have to keep on hearing. And so sometimes people do these vigils where they'll be by someone's bedside, just speaking to them, reminding them who they are. They're the son or the daughter of this one or that one, or they're a father or a mother or husband or wife. This is their job, this is their place in the world. And then they're trying to trigger their memory. So by this hearing and chanting process, then we're going to revive the memory of who we are. We've lost that memory, but we haven't lost our nature. Our nature is always there. Our eternal nature is there as Ananda Maya, pleasure-seeking. And the Ananda we're looking for is not the pleasure to be found in the material world, which is temporary, which is fleeting. And not all the positions which we find, just like here, Jad Bharat is saying that, no, if you want to play it being the king and I'm the servant, then I can play that game for you if that's what you want. But actually, you should know that, neither of us are servants or masters. So material platform, we are not servants or masters, but on absolute platform, we're all servants of Krishna, who is the only master. Bhaktaram Jagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suryam Sarvabhutanam Gyapamam Shantam Richati. Does anybody know the translation to that one? Talks to?
One who knows me is the enjoyer and controller of the planets and the supreme beneficiary of all austerities and sacrifices. Attains peace from the powers and the challenges and a friend of all living beings.
Fantastic, yes, great. So there's three main things there. Bhaktaram Jagatapasam, he's the only enjoyer of all the sacrifices that are made. So sometimes people offer sacrifices to the demigods, or sometimes they perform austerities to please their boss, etc. And then they get a reward for it. In the words of Mangalananda, the things that you do had better be true for the benefit of your soul. So we should be thinking consciously, what am I doing? What's the result of this? Am I implicated in something here? So you can just imagine a devotee goes to the job centre and says, I can't take any jobs which involve meat, fish, eggs, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling. And then we say, well, there's not very many jobs for you. Perhaps you can get a job in Govinda's restaurant. You can get a job in the Hare Krishna temple as a Brahmin. In fact, funny thing is, we have to, sometimes we're looking for a post like to fill in as a pujari, and typically you're not going to be able to find a pujari in the job centre, but for part of so we have to get them from other places. They don't really just emerge out of the schools and colleges in the UK, in Kali Yuga. So generally we have to outreach beyond the borders there, but still, nonetheless, we had to go through the procedure of putting an advertisement up, for Brahmin Pujari, and then someone actually applied, didn't they? Of course, they had no qualification, they didn't have an idea what it was all about. Oh yeah, I'll give that a try, yeah. You ever been a Pujari? Yeah, sure. What's your experience? I haven't got a clue. Yeah, so we make some temporary designation, we identify with that, just like the king here's thinking, I'm king, you're the servant, and I'm being sarcastic with you because you're consider yourself fortunate I'm only being sarcastic with you and not having you punished. So he's thinking like that he's got some control over this living entity, but nobody has control over us unless we give it. So therefore Krishna says, if you surrender unto me, I shall protect you from all sinful action, because we're giving control to so many people. But still we think, I won't give it to Krishna. But you give it to Krishna, you get the best reward. You don't just get a company car, or a company house, or a nice wage. You get eternal life full of bliss and knowledge. That's what you get from Krishna. And while everybody remains back here, still trying to lord over material nature, you're back home in the spiritual world forever, never to take birth again in this material world. Naiti mam eti sorjuna, janma karma chimedavyam. If we simply familiarise ourselves with Krishna's appearance and activities, understanding that his appearance is not a normal appearance. To the faithless it may appear like that. Avajanti mam mudha, manusham tanam ashutaha. If we think that Krishna's appearance is just like anyone else's appearance, and perhaps he was a wise person, and perhaps he spoke some philosophy, or we try to estimate him in some mundane way, then we are mudha, foolish. So this is Krishna's opinion. So we accept Krishna's words. Srila Prabhupada says in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita that one who doesn't understand the difference between Krishna's within and without is the greatest fool in trying to understand Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes people say, well, we shouldn't surrender to Krishna, we should surrender to the unborn within. But that's not what Krishna says. He didn't say anything about that in Bhagavad Gita. He says, surrender unto me. He says, if you remember me alone at the time of death, then you will come to me. He didn't say, if you remember man, you'll go to Brahman. He says, I am the source of the imperishable Brahman. So just as the light bulb is the source of the light, just as the sun planet is the source of the sun rays, then Krishna is the source of the Brahman. Therefore we go to the source. So under the spell of Maya, then we're servants of material nature, and sometimes we're thinking we're masters, but even the masters, just like someone may become a king or a queen or a prime minister or a president, and they may be what you see in the material world as top dog, but even top dog is answerable. The people will accept so much if they abuse them. If people who's in charge abuse those below them, then they lose their standing. But typically people are looking to follow someone yad achariteshu sestitad evitarojanaha sayat pramanam kuriti lokas tadu navartati. Whatever actions a great man performs, come and follow in his footsteps, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, the whole world pursues. So people, they look up to leaders and they expect good behaviour from them, even though they themselves are not performing good behaviour, but they expect it, it's intrinsic, it's natural. Just like these 4 social and spiritual orders are also natural. Although in Kali Yuga people may be unqualified members of these social and spiritual classes, still they're natural. But if one follows the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, then one can actually become qualified. In Kali Yuga it says that in the 12th canto, it says that the Asuras take birth in Brahmin families. So of course that doesn't mean to say that everybody who is take birth in the Brahmin families and Asura, and the devotees should be afraid of their kids and they should abandon them. No, it's not like that. Taking birth in a devotee family, or even if you're born in a Brahmin family but you don't have Brahminical proper training, then it doesn't matter, because actually in Kali Yuga everyone is Sudra or less. Less than Sudra, because to be a Sudra, what's some of the qualifications of a Sudra, anyone remember?
They serve the other orders.
Serve the others, yeah, journey through.
Obedient to the master.
Obedient, this is one of the things. So, but if you're obedient to a bad master, then how can you be a good Sudra? Well, yeah, it's like the blind is leading the blind. So when there's a good leader, then the Sudras, their life is very fortunate. But if the leaders are bad and they're misleading them, then the Sudra's life is unfortunate. So it's a great responsibility on leaders to lead the common people by setting a good example. And if they don't do that, then they're implicated in misleading, and they may enjoy some temporary fame and riches, but the results they get from misleading enter into very unpalatable situation in future lives. So Prabhupada said it's better to be an honest street sweeper than a charlatan meditator. So honesty is the best policy, and Lord Nityananda says the sufferings of an honest person don't last long. So therefore, in the association of devotees, we can be honest with each other, we can find someone we can reveal our mind to, and this is very beneficial for us to advance in devotional service. Because we want to hold some kind of perception of what we think we are in the eyes of others people, and we're afraid to actually reveal our mind. We're thinking someone will think less of us, but actually the opposite is true. When you reveal your mind to a devotee thinks more of you because you've been brave to reveal the mind. In material conception, strength is seen as pride. In spiritual life, strength is seen as humility. Because if someone has the strength to admit when they're wrong, then they can become right. But if we don't have that strength, then we just remain wrong and nobody says anything. Therefore, if someone points something out to us, we should be grateful that they're giving us a chance to become stronger in the spiritual life. And here, Jad Bharat is pointing out to the king that you're in the bodily conception of life, this conventional term of different positions in material life. It's just simply a temporary thing, and we can surrender to using these terms, the usage of it, or we can rise above it. So in this way, Jad Bharat is actually playing the role of spiritual advisor to the king, even though the king didn't solicit it. Then he's being merciful to the king by giving him the absolute truth. And we'll see that how that develops later on. Okay, anyone get any questions? Yes.
I thought that was interesting. I think you were saying contempt can also be shown from a senior to a junior due to familiarity. But I never thought of that. So I was wondering, how would you detect if you were if you were being contemptuous to a junior? How would you be able to detect that you were losing respect for the younger devotee? Because it can be it's easier for a younger devotee to be respectful because you see the older devotees very competent in certain areas. But for the older devotees, it's much harder sometimes to find that respect if you can see some of the discrepancies and then at the same time to try and maintain their respect. So would you do that by not being over familiar, by keeping a little distant from them?
Sometimes that's helpful. If someone's becoming over familiar with yourself and you think it's harming them, then you might keep a distance. But to keep a distance all the time means that we could all just become isolated from each other, because we can all tend to be over familiar with seniors and juniors. Even if you're with your spiritual master, to begin with you're on reverence, and after a while you might start to think, if you've had a couple of chastisements, you might start to think, well, that's okay, but what about you? And as soon as your mind thinks like that, then you should say, okay, this is not good. But you don't have to physically remove yourself. You can actually physically distance yourself in the sense that remind yourself who's who here. This person's taken the time to look after you and direct you in spiritual life. And sometimes it appears that they don't know the full picture, but it's possibly, you just have to entertain the possibility that we don't know the full picture and they're directing us in another way. If everything has to make sense before we put a foot forward, then it means we're just going to be stuck on the material platform. We're not going to rise above logic, we're not going to rise above reason. Now, it doesn't mean to say that there's no logic or reason, but Krishna is also beyond that. You know, someone was to try to understand God, they'd never by their own endeavour through logic and reason come to understand that he's a little cowherd boy, blue cowherd boy, plays a flute, and loves to tend the cows and runs around his bare feet. They'd never come to that. Krishna's well beyond logic. And so to rise beyond that confines, then we have to put trust in someone. And if we think, well, I'm only going to put trust in someone, when I'm 100% sure, but you'll never be sure unless we make an experiment with it. But anyway, back to the answer to your question. Is it to appreciate that what service someone's doing? Does mean to say, because we're urging someone to do better, either consciously, or we're trying to organise them better, or we're trying to inspire them more, or we're trying to show them where they're spacing out, or whatever. It does mean to say that we lose appreciation for what they are doing. So we always have to remain that. And then if Prabhupada says we should learn the art of bending without breaking. At the same time, if a devotee shouldn't be thinking that, well, you're breaking me. They should also be thinking that, why I have to be told the same thing time and time again? Why am I doing this to another devotee? This is a type of violence as well. Ignorance is a type of violence. So if there is a mutual appreciation for the fact that we are consciously giving our time to serve Krishna, and that helps. And if our direction to someone is coming from a place of love, or it's coming from a good place, it's coming from a place of concern, or a desire to see the person better situated, then that's good. So if we find we're not doing that, then we can just adjust that and just think to be a well-wisher. Prabhupada set that example also. He always signed himself your ever well-wisher. Sometimes he'd be writing to encourage somebody. It would be a chastisement, or it could be even a heavy chastisement, but it was always your ever well-wisher. And so from both sides, whether we're all associating as juniors to somebody and seniors to somebody. Even the devotee who's been in the temple a week, they're going to be senior to someone that's just come in the door. As perhaps you remember, when you were on the Bhakta program, you thought that somebody who's in the Bhakta program 2 weeks longer than you was somebody to listen to with awe and reverence. But we lose that somewhere along the line because we start to think, oh, this one's okay, but that one's an idiot, and blah, blah, blah. We start placing, because we're not as eager searching for Krishna from anyone, wherever it's coming from, then we lose that. So even the senior devotees can learn so much from junior devotees. And Kadamba Kanamaj gave a nice point. He says that a senior devotee shouldn't think that he can't offend a younger devotee. But at the same time, the junior devotee should think, why is this devotee always upset with me? I should try to change my attitude or change my way of behaviour so that I can please this person, because this person has got so much to give. So we shouldn't be blaming each other, we should be blaming ourselves for our own shortcomings. In this way, everybody rises up. Something else you could add?
Yeah, thank you very much. The initial point I really liked, like you're saying, seeing you can offend. I was also thinking, it kind of came into my mind about the nonviolent communication, is that sometimes what it is you have a need to see the person excel, because you know you could do a lot better, but it doesn't come out like that, so you think, you even don't even realise yourself that that's actually what it is that you feel, and it comes out in a way which is like almost abusive, and then you're thinking, I don't seem to like this devotee, and then the devotee is also thinking, oh, he doesn't seem to like me, I thought he liked me. And actually it's just a peripheral confusion. If they go deeper, then the younger devotee needs to feel that the older one appreciates him and likes him. And the older devotee needs to see that the younger devotee really excel, really tap into his potential. And so when they both connect on that deeper level, then they're not at odds with each other, because they're both trying to strive, for Krishna's lotus feet. and help each other, you know. And it just kind of gets confused on the peripheral, but when you go deeper.
Yeah, we should always bear in mind that Prabhupada said no lazies, no crazies. So lazy means not just physically lazy, but lazy mentally or spiritually. We should be looking to go forward. We can't just stay in the same place. And if someone's trying to help us, you know, so sometimes devotees develop this thing that they become over familiar with everyone who they're serving with or who's around them, and another person they'll listen to is the spiritual master. But then, if they develop that attitude to the devotees who they're with day by day, eventually that will become the attitude towards the spiritual master too. So when we become over familiar with our juniors or our peers, then we start to become over familiar with our seniors, and then we go over familiar with the spiritual master, and then we just don't take anything seriously. No one takes us seriously. So it's always trying to be respectful. Lord Chaitanya therefore said this verse, Srimad Nechina, is the most important verse because we should be respectful to all. Whether they're, how we show that respect may be different. And also, as if you're dealing with if you're dealing with a junior who is repeatedly not taking the instructions you're given, then you get an opportunity to become detached. And that means that we're acting without desire for a result, but we're acting for the person's benefit. Sometimes we get frustrated because we're saying something, showing something, giving some direction, and it doesn't manifest in another person. So we become frustrated because we're thinking, we put energy into this, I want something back out of it. So it's full of. So if we are becoming, even Prabhupada, you can see there's some transcendental angle there because sometimes that's the quick way to get a devotee to learn, to shake them up out of the mode of ignorance. But from our point of view, then we have to make sure that we're not hostile or inimical towards somebody, and if we do become more forceful, like Hridaya Nanda Maharaj was giving a college program in India once, and there was these many Indian students, and they were being quite argumentative, and then he started quoting to them because they were talking. He was asking a question. Yeah, they were talking about caste Brahmanism, and so they were going on about, I am Brahmin, and he said, yeah, but he was asking about the qualifications of them being Brahmin. He said, so if a Brahmin is eating meat and having illicit sex, taking intoxication, is he still a Brahmin? And they were dancing around the question. He said, answer my question. And then they kept sort of dancing around it, and then he brought it back. He says, are they a Brahmin? If they're doing all this, are they still a Brahmin? And then he was getting very more forceful, and he said, oh, so why would you stop shouting? He says, I'm shouting because you're not listening. But you could see that he wasn't angry. His purpose was still pure, was to get them to see the point. So we have to be pure in our motivation. And if we're not, then we can work on that. We can recognise sometimes we realise that, hey, I got a bit caught up there. Let me do it with the right motivation the next time, keep on. And we're all practicing on each other. The practice of devotion and service, we're practicing on each other. So just as we want to be tolerated, we have to realise that people are tolerating us. Sometimes we think, oh, this person's intolerant with me, but we could realise, well, perhaps I'm somebody that needs to be tolerated. And it's easier to tolerate others when you realise that they're tolerating you, or that they must be tolerating us because otherwise we wouldn't be here still. Anything else?
Just a comment from Laura. I feel it's good practice respecting our seniors, accepting and appreciating their instructions will help us surrender to the spiritual master and ultimately Krishna.
Yeah, it's good practice. Thanks for your question and the point, Laura. And we have to keep that good practice. And therefore, we have to protect our Bhakti-Lata beach, the seed of the keeper of devotional service. We have to protect it by not hearing from people who are going to criticize devotees, not hearing watered down versions of Krishna consciousness which is going to limit our ability to go forward in Krishna consciousness. So we have to choose our association wisely. And if we're unsure about anyone or anything, then we should go to someone we trust and say, "No, someone's saying this, or I'm hearing this or hearing that. What do you say about that?" And this way we can protect our Bhakti-Lata beach and always try to maintain that respect. This is what Lord Chaitanya wanted, that we respect everybody. He didn't even just say respect devotees, respect the non-devotees, respect everybody, they're all servants of Krishna. And it's only a matter of time before they go back to Krishna. Okay, we'll just close there. Thank you for listening. Iskon Guru Ki Jai, Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Iskon Jai Krishna Ki Jai,
Haribo. His Grace Prabhupada Prana Prabhu, please.